Good morning. My name is Nathan Andrews. On behalf of the Life Focus Society, I'd like to wish you on this Women's Day and share a few thoughts looking at women through the lens of a man. Shakespeare in Love, Labour's Lost, pens a line that beauty is brought by the judgment of the eye. Margaret Wolfe Hungerford wrote in her book that famous line that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which basically makes the point that what a woman looks like through a man's lens will really depend more on the man than it is really the woman in question. And as there is slightly more than men than women in the world, the answer is probably equally as varied. However, for a very brief snapshot, let's look at how three men, very familiar to us, looked at women. As Julie Andrews said, let's start at the very beginning. In Genesis 2:23, God presents Eve to Adam, and Adam exclaims as he looks at Eve, this wonderful human being, he says, "Here is someone like me." Or as Max Lucado paraphrases it, Adam basically says, "Wow." He's blown away, and the passage closes with the line that the man and his wife were naked, but they felt no shame. So through Adam's lens, at this juncture, here's a beautiful woman that he instantly fell for, who was perfect in his sight, and as the last line implies, he looked at Eve, even though she was naked. That look did not make her feel uncomfortable in any way. Sadly, the narrative changes in chapter 3, and they now need to cover their modesty from each other. What changed? Simply the way that they looked at each other, specifically the context of the way Adam looked at Eve. Now that his eyes were opened, she instinctively felt shame when he looked at her. There was that element of lust. All women can relate in some way that men sometimes can make them feel uncomfortable just by the way they look at them. Now Adam's lens had got corrupted, and every man born since has inherited this warped lens. Women now have become objects for men's gratification. Let's fast forward a couple of thousand years to Solomon, who had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Writing at the end of his life, he says, "Live well with the wife you love," in Ecclesiastes. 18 times in that book he says, "I saw," using his lens, right? A metaphor that is often used for wisdom. But wisdom needs revelation, which comes through hearing, as Moses reminds us in the book of Deuteronomy. Solomon's lens had got distorted because he looked at wealth, power, and of course women through the lens of his self, evidenced through the use of "I" so many times in the book. The lens of the narcissist will always be distorted and see women as a means to an end. Finally, let's look at the second Adam, who once again looks at women through an undistorted lens. Mary is sitting at his feet, and although Martha objects to Jesus firmly says to Martha that Mary has chosen the better part. I like Abdu Mare's suggestion that perhaps Jesus was referring to Mary's desire to learn from Jesus, as a male disciple would do normally, as the better part that she had chosen. In Jesus' lens, there was no limitation to what she could do on account of her sex. But that perspective can only come through an unsullied lens. Dear ladies, on this Women's Day, I pray that the Lord would surround you with men who have had spiritual optometry. And please pray that the men in your life would have a view of women that reflects their Heavenly Master. God bless you. Happy Women's Day.